All right, Jose DeCastro, 23 CR 013015.
Good morning, Your Honor. Agnes Botello and Nathan Cave for the record. Good morning, State.
Good morning, Michael Me on behalf of the defendant who's present with me this morning.
So I have signed 2 media requests that permit recording or photographing these proceedings, but I have not granted any other requests to record or live stream these proceedings. So I need Mr. DeCastro and everybody else who wants to stay in the courtroom to surrender their phones, or you can leave.
Are your phone covered and I'll take one or you can exit.
I need Mr. DeCastro to empty all of his pockets.
What's that?
Empty your pockets and give up your phones to the judge.
Okay.
I have to give you my phones?
Yeah.
My phones have to be completely off?
Yep. I don't really want to be part of your YouTube channel. So,
You already are.
great,
You already are.
awesome.
I'm not gonna get into this guy though. I'll get into someone else. I'm not touching myself.
No, they're gonna go to my marshal.
He's a pig.
Excuse me?
I said he's a pig.
Okay. So I'm not gonna permit you to speak to anybody in my courtroom in that manner, and if you don't want to apologize, I'm gonna hold you in contempt.
I apologize to the court, Your Honor.
No, you can apologize to, they've done nothing to you.
Actually, Your Honor, when you were here, you came over and gave me a directive for no reason and started telling me what to do.
Okay,
I
well,
have all the respect in the world for the court. I follow the rule of law all the time. I
no,
correct
it
the
is,
rule of
it is their job to maintain the safety and security of the courtroom.
law. I agree with you, Your Honor.
So if you want to speak like that in my courtroom, I'm going to hold you in contempt. And if I hold you in contempt, you're going to jail. That is not my wish. Okay?
I wish you would.
All right. So I need you to empty your pockets too. Suit pocket, pants pocket.
This is illegal. This is a violation of my Fourth Amendment.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. I don't have any recording devices on me. What are you talking about?
How about your suit jacket?
I don't have anything on me. This is preposterous.
No, it's
This
not.
really is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Me, your phone too. Off.
They're recording everything.
They have a media request.
That's right, and I'm not recording anything. Your guy here took my phone, so his phone's not on.
All right.
You can take the lawyer's phone too?
No, I'm not going to take the lawyer's phone. He's an officer of the court. All right. Do we have everybody's phones? Are they off? All right, good. All right. All right, this is the time set for the trial of State of Nevada versus Jose DeCastro, 23 CR 013015. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, we are, Your Honor.
How many witnesses do you have?
We anticipate one.
All right, is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I have your request to convert counsel to standby counsel. I'm going to deny that request. Either you represent him or he should have previously requested a Feretta canvas to represent himself. That I just consider that a delay tactic, so that request is denied. Are you ready to proceed? Otherwise, I'm assuming you are.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, will the state please call the first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Brandon Bork, and he's in the anteroom. Follow me all the way down.
Morning.
You're going to remain standing. Raise your right hand to be sworn back. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated. State your name for the record and spell it first and last name, please.
It's Brandon Bork. Brandon is Branden. Bork. Bourque.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sir, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Sir, how are you employed?
I'm a police officer with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
How long have you been employed with Metro?
Just over 8 years.
What is your, what's your occupation there? Like, where are you assigned?
I currently am a field training officer at Summerlin Area Command.
Okay. And so are you a patrol officer
Yes, ma'am.
that also trains newer officers?
Yes.
Okay. Were you employed with Metro? I'm assuming you are, because you've been employed for 8 years, back on March 15th of 2023.
Yes, I was.
Were you a patrol officer at that time?
Yes, I was.
As a patrol officer, do you wear a uniform?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe the uniform?
It would be the same uniform I'm wearing today.
Okay, so for the record, you're wearing a tan uniform with the logos, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, located throughout your shirt.
Yes,
Okay. As a patrol officer, do you have access to or utilize a marked patrol vehicle?
yes.
And can you describe what this marked patrol vehicle looks like?
It's black and white in color, and it has the LVMPD's logo on all sides.
Okay. And is it also equipped with like lights and sirens?
Yes,
Okay. And so you were employed as a patrol officer back on March 15th of 2023?
yes,
At some point in time, did you conduct a traffic stop while you were working in that capacity
yes, I did.
on that date?
Yes,
Okay. And was that for a vehicle bearing license plate 748Z, like zebra, T like Tom, B like boy?
yes.
And why did you stop that vehicle?
I had conducted a DMV records check on that license plate, and it came back expired and suspended.
And where is it that you stopped that vehicle?
It was 4155 South Grand Canyon, which was near Target.
Okay. Is that over on Flamingo and Grand Canyon?
Yes,
Okay, and that's here in Las Vegas, Clark County, Nevada, sir?
yes,
And you indicated it was for a license plate that was expired and suspended?
yes.
So when you initiated the traffic stop, what did you do, or how did you do that?
I approached the driver, let her know the reason for the stop, and obtained her identifying information, registration, insurance.
Okay, and I forgot to ask you earlier, but pursuant to your uniform and as a patrol officer, are you equipped with a body worn camera?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and do you also have a radio?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and are those items, both the body worn camera and the radio, on your uniform today?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and is that how the body worn camera and or the radio were on your uniform back on March 15th of 2023?
Yes,
And to your knowledge, was your body worn camera functioning at that time?
yes, it was functioning.
Okay. And so you made contact with the driver of that Hyundai.
Yes, I did.
How would you characterize the nature of your encounter or the nature of your encounter with that driver?
She was cooperative with me. I explained the reason for the stop. She seemed confused, not sure exactly how it had become suspended. But she was friendly and cooperative with me.
Okay, and she identified herself.
She did. She had a picture of her license on her phone.
Okay. And at some point, sir, did you go back to your patrol vehicle to further your investigation?
I did.
And as you were, let me ask you this. When you effectuated the traffic stop on this vehicle, where did you park or stop your vehicle in relation to the Hyundai that you were stopping?
I parked approximately 10, 15 feet behind the stopped vehicle. We ended up in a parking lot.
Okay. And was the driver the sole occupant of the vehicle?
Yes,
Okay. And so when you returned to your patrol vehicle to conduct your further investigation, was the driver within eyesight?
yes, she was.
Okay. And is it your habit and custom and also your training to keep the individual that you are, dealing with within eyesight?
Yes,
And so at some point while you were still in your vehicle, in your patrol vehicle, did something occur that's causing you to have to testify before Judge Zimmerman today?
yes, I had an unrelated person come over to start recording the traffic stop.
Okay. And we talked about your body worn camera previously, but did you activate your body worn camera prior to the traffic stop?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Or, just before you initiated the traffic stop?
I initiated the stop and then I immediately activated my camera.
Okay. And how is it that body worn camera is activated on your uniform, sir?
I have a battery pack that's on my belt in the front, and I press the activation button, which is in the front.
Okay. And so is it just a tap of that activation button?
It's a double tap on the front, yes.
Okay. And how is it that you would stop recording?
I would hold down that same power button.
Okay.
Or it can be turned off. There's a toggle switch on the top that slides on and off.
Okay. Okay, and so your body worn camera was running as of, the traffic stop being initiated?
Yes,
Okay. And so you described an unrelated individual coming over to, your stop.
yes.
Okay, can you describe this individual?
He was a white male adult. He was wearing a bright colored hoodie and blue jeans.
Okay. That individual, do you see him here in court today?
Yes, I do.
Can you please point to him and describe something he's wearing?
He's wearing a suit and a blue tie.
Your Honor, please let the record reflect identification of the defendant.
So ordered.
And so, what do you do upon seeing this individual approach the driver of the vehicle you had stopped?
Initially, when I saw him, he was just recording. I ignored him and continued my records check. Then when he came over to the driver and started speaking with them, I got out of the car, approached the driver, and told DeCastro to back up.
Okay. When you first noticed, so you identified the unknown or unrelated male subsequently, correct?
Yes,
And what was his name?
Jose DeCastro?
Okay. And that's the individual you identified here in court?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you first laid eyes on the defendant, approximately how far away was he from the driver of the vehicle in the Hyundai?
Approximately somewhere within 5 to 10 feet.
Okay. And you indicated that he was recording?
Yes.
Okay. What did you see that led you to believe he was recording?
He had his cell phone camera pointed directly at me.
Okay. And so is that when, upon seeing him being that close to the driver, is that when you told him, you walked up to the driver of the stopped vehicle and asked Mr. DeCastro to back up?
Yes, once he started talking with the driver.
Okay. And why is it that you did that, officer?
Well, I can't have unrelated people next to my traffic stops. I don't know if he's a dangerous person, armed. He could be a boyfriend of the stopped person. It's for my safety and the safety of the person I've stopped.
Okay. Because you're also in charge of the safety of the individual that this unrelated individual is making contact with. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay. And so you saw it as an officer safety issue as well as a safety issue for the driver?
yes,
Okay. And so when you approached, well, you said he was recording, the defendant was recording. At any time, did you tell him to stop recording?
no. In fact, I told him he can continue recording.
Okay. He can continue to record given what?
As long as he backed up and gave me an appropriate distance to work.
Okay. And so when you asked the defendant to back up, did he follow your order?
No, he did not.
Okay. And so what did you do next?
I gave him 3 additional warnings to back up.
Okay. And did he obey those orders?
No, he did not.
And what, if anything, did you do with the driver of the stopped vehicle, the Hyundai?
At that point, I chose to release the driver of the Hyundai and then focus my attention on Jose DeCastro.
Okay. And for the record, officer, at that point in time, were you the only uniformed officer, or the only officer present at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And so at this point, you were dealing with the stop driver as well as an unrelated individual and having to make contact or maintain visual of both.
Yes,
And at that point, the defendant was not being cooperative,
correct, yes.
okay? So you release the driver of the Hyundai. What do you tell that person to let her go?
I just said that she was free to go, simply.
And subsequently, did you turn your attention on the defendant?
Yes.
And can you tell Judge Zimmerman the nature of your interaction with the defendant after that?
I ordered DeCastro to the front of my patrol vehicle while pointing at it and told him that he was detained
Okay. And what was the purpose of detaining him?
for obstructing my initial traffic stop with the Hyundai.
Okay. And did he obey your lawful order?
No, he did not.
And what happened next?
He continued filming me. I continued pointing toward my patrol vehicle, continued telling him he was detained. All the while, he just continued shifting his body around, recording me on the phone, and refusing to go to the car.
Okay. So what did you do in response?
I used my hand to escort him to the patrol vehicle. So I placed my hand on his shoulder, and at that point, he swatted my hand away.
And what happened next?
That's when I grabbed him by the shirt, and I spun him around, and then we ended up at the front of my patrol vehicle. We were both still standing.
At some point, did you request additional units to respond to the scene?
I did, that was before I grabbed him,
Okay.
when I initially detained him.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, once you had him at your patrol vehicle, or the front, the hood of your patrol vehicle, what happened next?
Officer Dingley, another officer in the area, had arrived, and he came over to help me handcuff him.
Okay. And were you successful, or did the defendant cooperate in being handcuffed?
He did not cooperate. I told him 7 times to face my patrol vehicle. He did not listen. I told him 6 times to turn around. He did not listen. It wasn't until I told him that he was going to go to jail, that was the consequence of not listening, that he allowed us to handcuff.
Okay. And after he was handcuffed, but when he was handcuffed, was it just you and Officer Dingle present?
Yes.
Okay. Once he was handcuffed, what, if anything, happened next?
He continued to argue with my partners, Officer Dingley and some other officers that were starting to show up. And then I focused my roles in completing the report and calling the sergeant because he requested a supervisor.
Okay. And at some point, was he arrested for account of obstructing a public officer
Yes.
and also for resisting a public officer or resisting arrest?
Yes.
And was he, at any point in time during your interaction with him or your continued visual of his interaction with other officers, did he cooperate with any of the officers present at the scene?
No, he kept shifting around, and normally we have people stand still in front of our car, and I could hear him arguing with the other officers.
You indicated you had your body-worn camera turned on at this time.
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to look at your body-worn camera prior to court today?
Yes, I did.
If I were to show you a snippet of it, and Your Honor, we're gonna be screen sharing through Zoom. It takes a minute. Okay. Officer, are you able to see, there's not a screen over there, so I might have to bring mine over to you with the court's permission. Okay. Okay. Officer, I'm showing you my computer screen. Is it fair to say that what's being shared on the screen as well as what's showing up on my computer screen are 2 files, one labeled 416B.mp4, the other one labeled 468, number sign 1.mp4.
Yes.
Okay. I am just gonna, and for the record, Your Honor, all body-worn camera footage have been disclosed to the defense well in advance of today's trial. I'm gonna just show you a brief snippet of the one labeled 468 underscore number sign 1.mp4. Do you recognize what's depicted here?
Yes, this is the initial Hyundai that I had stopped on the traffic stop.
Okay, and so do you recognize this particular file as the body-worn camera of your interaction, first with the Hyundai and then the defendant on March 15th of 2023?
Yes.
Okay, And does this show the time that you activated your camera?
Yes,
Okay, similar to what you testified to earlier.
yes,
And you've had an opportunity to see this entire, like, 12 and a half minute long video, is that right?
yes,
Does it fairly and accurately depict the traffic stop and also your interaction with the defendant on the date and time that we've been discussing,
yes,
at the location that we've been discussing?
yes,
Okay, Your Honor, I move to admit and subsequently publish the file labeled 468 underscore number sign 1.mp4.
Spence,
No objection.
will be admitted and published.
Thank you. And let me just join up. Very loud.
Officer Ross Metro, please have one over, is your registration expired and also suspended? On the usually suspend license plates for insurance claims. It doesn't give you a reason why, but it is suspended. Did you switch insurances or?
Yeah, it's the microphone. Your Honor, permission to just put it up here,
Yep,
away from the microphone.
You'll have to call the DMV, they'll give you the specific reason why it was suspended, and then you just have to correct it through them. But anyway, that's the reason why I'm calling over. The registration date expired and suspended. Welcome. For your registration, it doesn't go to auto payment. Every year you have to sign on to the website to pay it. You probably just remember what I did for this. Either go online or you may have to make an appointment and show up. It just Yeah. Criminal history, ever been in trouble for anything? It's your car, right? If you have the app, pull it up on the app. Call the company, whatever you like, works for you, as long as I approve. That would be good. Reading that, Mr. Director, please. Do you have the physical one or? Is it at home? Make sure you bring it with you, okay? Okay. Insurance, I'll be right back.
I'm gonna pause it at timestamp 9 minutes and 16 seconds. At this point, officer, do you see the unrelated male that you've been talking about enter camera view?
Yes, I do.
And could you just point to where he is in the video on my screen?
Yes, he's right here.
And let the record reflect, he identified a male wearing like a light colored blue jacket towards the middle of the screen. And is this the individual that you have been talking about, the defendant here today?
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
Don't engage my driver, back up. Hey, back up. Back up, you're not involved. You can film me, you need to stay away from my driver. Back up. Back up for a minute, please. You're obstructing. Get away from my car, stop. Okay, listen. She deserves privacy. This is not your business. Okay, you're being detained right now. Come over my car. Come over my car. Come over my car right now. No, come over. Listen, I am gonna put my hands on you. No, you're not. Control officer on the one. I gotta make sure that you guys get my people on the phone. I have an obstructive male here, so no pity. So you can't just stop. Come over here to my car. Come over here. I need additional. This is obstructive. No, come over to the car. I'm gonna grab you. You're gonna go to the ground. Listen, you're detained right now. Get your supervisor out here. You're not trying to get a coach, man. Easy, bro. I just need additional unit. Come over to my car. I'm not to work. You're being detained for obstruction. You need to set the phone down on the hood. Set the phone down on the hood. You're being detained. Now you're gonna put hands on me. Come over here. Why are you grabbing me? Come over here. Sure. Come over here. I don't care about the phone. Turn around. Turn around. I'm not doing anything. You're being detained right now. Turn around. Get your supervisor. Stop. Your camera's on? Okay, then put your hands behind your back. No. Go ahead.
Now, officer, at 11:38, or just a little bit before, there was another officer that comes onto the screen. Who's that?
This is Officer Dingley.
Okay.
Handcuffs. Why? Put your hands behind your back. Give me some of this question. I haven't done anything wrong. Put your hands behind your back. Anything wrong. Don't make me use the back. If you want to detain me, then put the I'm putting you in handcuffs. But I'm not putting my hands on my leg. Okay, so you're gonna put it. I'm obviously leg. Put it behind. Put it behind your back. Right now you're gonna get a ticket. For what? Do not put your hands behind your back. You're going to jail. Put your hands behind your back. Can I turn my camera out face me? No. Can we agree on that? No, I don't know if you have any weapons. I don't have any weapons. Stop reaching. There's no weapons on me, guys. Stop reaching. My chief lost color. You said to stop to. Put your hands behind your back. You're going to jail. I'm placing you in handcuffs right now. For what? Turn around. For officer safety, right? Turn around for officer safety. The camera's still running, guys. The camera's still running. I don't care about the camera. Put your hand behind your back and don't reach for this phone.
And that concludes the 12-minute and 31-second video. The video marked 468_1.mp4. Officer, at some point after this interaction that we just saw, did you come to realize that your body-worn camera had accidentally or inadvertently turned off?
Yes.
Okay. And at what point in time did it turn off?
It would have turned off at the completion of the video that we just saw.
Move away.
Prior
Prior to what?
to the handcuffing.
Okay. Did you we noticed Officer Dingle show up to the scene though?
Yes,
Okay, and do you know whether he had his body worn camera turned on?
yes, it was activated.
Okay, and so what would have been missed by the inadvertent turning off of your body worn camera would have been captured on Officer Dingle's body worn camera?
Yes,
Okay, and did I allow you to look at that video footage from Officer Dingle this morning prior to testifying here today?
yes, you did.
And did you have an opportunity to look at it to determine whether it was in fact the video related to this event?
Yes, I looked at it and it was video related.
Okay, and so, gonna turn your attention now to the video labeled 416B dash, or .mp4, and I'm just gonna,
It says 4168.
oh, I'm sorry. Is that B or D? I think it's a B, Jim. 416B, .mp4.
Okay.
Or 8. And I just played the first 13 seconds, but actually I'm gonna fast forward. Now, for the record, the video's upside down. I recorded upside down? Yes?
Yes, it did.
All right. Actually,
Why would it record upside down?
Ma'am, there's a setting in the application where you can rotate it. This officer may not have checked that beforehand.
Okay.
stopping or starting at 4:54 timestamp on the video that we've been talking about. Do you recognize what's depicted, at least in this still portion?
Yes, this is me and DeCastro in front of my patrol vehicle.
Okay, and so to your knowledge, and after having watched this, does this fairly and accurately depict your interaction with the defendant on March 15th of 2023 as caught on camera by Officer Dingley's body worn camera?
Yes.
Move to admit 416 B or 8, MP4.
No objection.
Do we know if it's an 8 or a B for sure?
It looks like a B too.
Okay.
Thank you.
3, I lose. All right.
Okay,
416B.MP4 will be admitted and published.
thank you. And I'm just gonna start from 4:54. And may I approach you on that?
Can we move the water bottle so we can see it too?
Of course.
Thank you.
You can come up.
You can.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Is there any way to rotate it so it's right side up?
No, blind. Just the video. Okay, there you go. This way for you.
There you go.
Now, Neil, you're on my coffee. Let go of the cup. I'm not gonna fight you. Let go, you're on my wrist. They hurt. Let go of the cup. I'm not trying to fight you. Let go of my cup. I don't have any fire on that breaker feed. Same old watch the back seat camera on me. Now you just hit me in the dick, dude. Now I know you got any fire. You just hit me in the fucking cock, bro. You just whacked me in the dick, dude. You hit me in the nuts for no reason. What's your name? My name is Jose. Jose? There you go. I identify myself. You're jerking me around by the wrist.
Can you tell us a little bit? Just, can you tell us just a little bit?
Okay, I'm gonna stop it at 11:35. So officer, did the body worn camera portions that we played, or that I played, fairly and accurately depict your interaction with the defendant on March 15th of 2023?
Yes, it did.
Concerning, I just want to talk with a little bit about what was depicted in the video. In the video from your body worn camera, it shows, you know, the state of your stop with the Hyundai driver. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. And at some point prior to you making contact with the defendant, you noticed him kind of recording further away from the vehicle, correct?
yes.
And at that point in time, you didn't have a problem with that. You didn't really approach the defendant yet, correct?
Correct.
It was when he started making contact with the driver, your stopped driver, that you approached him and asked him to back up.
Yes,
And at some point in time, in the video, it's recorded, you told him that he is allowed to record, but he just needed to back up.
yes.
Okay. And what was the reason for you trying to maintain, one, the lack of, no contact with the stopped person, and two, trying to gain distance between the defendant, yourself, and the stop driver?
My first intention is I wasn't trying to delay my traffic stop any longer than it had to be. I was trying to make it as short as possible for the driver. And then the second was for officer safety. What we're taught in the academy is that for a normal human's reaction time with open ground, anything within 21 feet, that suspect would be able to charge an officer without them being able to react in time.
All right. And at that point in time, you were the only officer present, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when he began, or when the defendant failed to obey your command to back up, that's when you decided to engage him?
Yes.
Okay. I have no more questions for this witness. Thank you.
Vince?
Good morning, officer. How are you doing?
Morning, sir. I'm well. How are you?
Very well. How many feet did you order the defendant to back up specifically?
I never had an opportunity to give him an exact distance.
How far back did you intend to have him back up, even if you didn't express that?
In the background of the video, you could see that there was a parked semi-truck and a light pole. I would have directed him somewhere in that area, which would have been outside the 21 feet.
Your testimony is you never told him an exact distance to back up, correct?
Yes, he never allowed me to.
What do you mean he never allowed you to?
I asked him to back up, and he continued arguing with me, so I could never specify exact distance for him.
But you had time to give him 5 commands to back up, is that correct?
Yes,
Your testimony is he never backed up when you were giving him commands, is that correct?
if he backed up, it may have been inches, but he didn't substantially back up.
And you just reviewed the body-worn camera from your chest, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. You didn't notice him backing up every time you directed him to back up?
he did not back up.
So you backed up 0 feet, in your opinion? Based on that video?
Not 0 feet.
What was that?
He didn't back up 0 feet, he was moving his feet. As to exactly how far he moved back, I don't know, but it wasn't substantial.
What would have been substantial in your opinion? Or what do you mean by that?
I would have guided him if he wasn't arguing with me back toward the light pole and the parked semi-truck.
And
Would have, again, would have been outside of the 21 feet. That was my goal.
So in your opinion, you have the ability, or you would in any traffic stop, ask somebody to move back 21 feet, is that correct?
Yes, for our training,
And what was that training?
that while we're conducting lawful activity, we're allowed a reasonable distance to conduct our activity.
But where do you get that 21 feet number from specifically?
That's taught to us in the academy. It's based on reaction time, normal human reaction time to a threat.
So your position is anytime you're engaged in any law enforcement activity, you would create a 21 feet perimeter?
Not necessarily, it depends on other environmental factors such as obstacles and barriers.
So your testimony is that every time you conduct a traffic stop, as long as there's no barriers, you would order a pedestrian to back up 21 feet, is that correct?
I would, yes.
What training do you have in regards to the First Amendment?
It's standard academy training.
Can you explain what that entails?
Usually includes a classroom setting, PowerPoint taught by police officer, academy officer.
Do you remember receiving that training specifically?
Yes,
How long ago was that?
when I was first employed about 8 years ago.
Do you have any follow-up training?
Specifically on First Amendment, we've had some follow-up training regarding First Amendment auditors.
Okay, can you explain what that follow-up training was?
The follow-up training was just a refresher on the First Amendment and how the department wants to handle or react to First Amendment auditors.
In that training, did they explain any case law governing how many feet somebody has to move back or anything like that?
Objection, Your Honor, at this point, relevance, and I think it's beyond the scope of, the charges that you are to determine guilt, on at this time.
Can you tell me what's the relevance?
Yes, Your Honor. He detained the defendant after issuing commands back up a particular distance. He's testified he's received training. I should be entitled to cross-examine him about what that training is and how he's coming up with the specific numbers he's using to
I
issue.
think her objection was with respect to the case law that you're inquiring about.
Your Honor, our position is if he is issuing commands that are contrary to that case law and he's been trained on that case law, then there can't be an obstruction of justice.
So I'm going to sustain the objection and ask you to move along.
Have you had any prior issues enforcing the First Amendment?
No,
Prior to this event taking place, had you heard of Chille DeCastro?
no.
Do you recall when you first heard about First Amendment auditors specifically?
Go for it.
It would have been in the academy.
So that was when you were first trained? You had heard about the auditors back then?
Yes, when we were learning about the First Amendment, they would typically bring up issues that might be a frequently seen thing. And First Amendment auditors are typically the ones that we encounter when there's First Amendment claims against us.
Do you have any belief that First Amendment auditors are likely to be violent?
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance?
Uh,
I'm only concerned with Mr. DeCastro. Okay,
Your Honor, one of the legal issues at question here is whether or not these commands are reasonable. I think that has to be based upon his past experiences in training.
sustain.
During this traffic stop in particular, what specific factors led you to believe there might be a danger to officer safety?
Based on his proximity to my driver, based on his demeanor being argumentative, based on his physical demeanor, his veins were popping out of his neck as he was yelling at me.
You could see his veins popping out of his neck from your back where your vehicle is.
When I was at the driver's side window, I could see that, but not at my car.
So when you see him walking out from your car, what is your specific concern regarding officer safety at that point in time?
Well, it's my safety and the safety of the driver. I don't know who this person is. I've never met him before. He could be peaceful, he could be violent, I just don't know. There's so many unknown factors. And I also have a responsibility to protect that driver. If I were in that driver's position, I wouldn't want to be approached by some random person recording me, interviewing me.
Did you ever ask the driver their opinion about whether they wanted him there or not?
No, my first step
Objection,
was,
relevance.
Sustained.
Was your primary concern him speaking to the driver or him not backing up allegedly?
my primary concern was safety. I don't know if he was armed or what his intention was.
Do you presume someone is armed and dangerous just because they're in public?
I can't rule out that he's unarmed.
But you had no reason to believe he was armed on this occasion?
No, nobody had told me he was armed, and I didn't see any weapons visible, but he was wearing clothing that could have easily concealed weapons.
So when you first came upon the scene, you were in your vehicle typing on your computer, is that correct?
Yes,
And what were you doing in relation to that traffic stop at that point in time?
conducting a background check to see if her license was valid, to see if she had any criminal history, to help me make my decision whether to warn her or issue citation.
You stated your belief that the driver was entitled to privacy,
I did say that.
and what do you mean by that?
Instead of continuing to give him commands to back up, I said something different to try and help him understand. She's really not entitled to privacy, but she's entitled to safety.
So your explanation is that you said that because you were just trying to convince him to back up, not because you believed?
Yes, if I continue to give the command to back up and he's not listening, I can't expect something different to happen if I just keep saying back up.
In your police report, do you recall referencing the fact that he had due notice in your opinion of what you were commanding him to do?
Yes, when I gave him 4 commands to back up, those do notice.
Okay. But you'll agree with me, he did not have notice as to the distance you wanted him to back up, is that correct?
That's correct.
Approximately how long were you issuing these commands to him before you decided to detain the defendant?
Approximately 15, 20 seconds.
And your testimony is you didn't have any time during that entire back and forth to tell him a specific distance to back up to?
Not time, but no opportunity.
How so?
Well, every time I tried to speak with him, he would argue he wasn't listening at all. So if he's not understanding back up, how would he explain something that was more complex?
Well, what was preventing you from saying back up to a particular location?
First, I would want him to back up, and then if he didn't back up far enough, I would give him an exact location.
Okay. But you never did, correct?
No, I never did.
Did the defendant's verbal comments towards you influence what you decided to do that day?
No,
On the video, did you see that the point in time you decided to detain him was specifically after he made an insulting comment towards you?
that wasn't why I chose to detain him. I realized that he wasn't going to back up at that time.
His comments didn't make you angry at him?
No.
In your review of the video just now, he had both hands in front of him the entire time, is that correct?
No, at one point he reaches toward his back pocket to pull out his second phone.
Did you quickly see that it was a second phone he was going for?
Yes,
Okay. So once you see him produce the second phone in his hands, he's obviously not reaching for a weapon, is that correct?
at that time, no, he wasn't.
What time of day did this occur at?
If I remember correctly, I think it was around 4:30 in the afternoon.
And this was in a broad public place.
Yes,
Does the fact that this occurred in broad daylight in public influence your decision-making as far as issuing commands to the defendant?
it could. In this particular case, it didn't.
And why is that?
There was nobody around us other than me and the driver and DeCastro.
You testified he swatted your hand away, is that your testimony today?
Yes, that's the best way I can describe it.
And you saw his arm do this, or you just felt it?
I saw and felt it.
Do you recall in your police report stating that you did not believe his intent was to harm you?
Yes, I wrote that.
And what is your basis for reaching that conclusion?
Well, he could have been charged with battery on a police officer, which would have been more severe. But I didn't think his intent was to hurt me, so I didn't charge him with that.
You testified today that one of the things you were concerned about was him not going over to your vehicle, is that true?
Yes,
Will you agree with me that he actually did walk over to your vehicle at some point during the interaction?
yes, but it wasn't reasonable, the amount of time it took him.
What would be a reasonable amount of time?
Asking him to step in front of my car and then doing so immediately.
And how fast is it immediately?
This isn't based off of time, my response, it's just based off of interaction. I had to tell him he was detained multiple times. And I made it clear what he was detained for. I said he was detained for obstructing. And I gave him several commands to step in front of my car. So I would think a reasonable person would walk over to my car, and then we'd have a conversation there.
And how specifically did his presence obstruct your ability to complete the traffic stop?
Again, I don't know what his intention is. I don't know if he's armed. All I saw was him recording, which, again, I had no issue with. I told him I had no issue with. At some point in time, if I were to issue citation to the driver, my focus would be on the driver and what's inside her car. At that point, I hadn't pulled her out. I hadn't pat her down. I don't know if she has any weapons in the car, or what her intent was, if there was anything underlying. So my intention on having DeCastro back up was so that I didn't have split attention. He was too close for me to have split attention.
So what are the things you stated that you were concerned about, I guess, from a safety point of view, was that he didn't identify himself? Is that true?
No, I didn't care about his identity until I had him detained.
Okay. At any point during the, I guess, detention of the defendant, did you pat him down to determine he didn't have any weapons?
I did.
Okay, and when was that during the duration of the interaction?
That was immediately after handcuffing.
Okay, did you discover any weapons on him?
No, I did not.
From your police car, while he's walking up, you can essentially have a complete view of his movements and what he's doing at that point in time.
Yes,
And you never saw him during that time period before you got out of your car and reached for any weapons or anything like that?
no,
Were there other individuals around the traffic stop other than the defendant and the driver?
not that I can remember.
Do you recall anyone walking through the scene and asking about the restaurant next door?
I don't remember that.
But your testimony is if there was someone else on the video, you would have been ordering that person to back up 21 feet?
I would have first asked them to back up, and most people do. And then if they did not comply, then I'd give them a specific area to back up to.
You ordered him not to speak to the driver, is that correct?
Yes, well, I remember asking him to back up. I don't remember if I specifically asked him not to speak to the driver. I think I may have said, don't talk to her, or something to that effect.
Did he speak to her before you got out of your patrol vehicle or afterwards?
Before. I saw DeCastro filming, I stayed in my vehicle and continued my business. Then when I saw him speaking to the driver, that's when I exited.
Did you see him speak to the driver after you exited the vehicle at any point?
I don't remember if he spoke to the driver after I exited.
At any point, did you hear specifically what he may have said to the driver?
No, I was too far away and it was windy.
Is your position that anytime you're engaged in a traffic stop, nobody can speak to the driver?
They can speak to them at a reasonable distance.
And is that 21 feet?
It could be shorter, it could be longer. Again, depends on the environment, totality, the circumstances.
Do you think people can easily verbally communicate at 21 feet?
No, not without shouting.
Did at some point the defendant inform you that he was a member of the press?
He did?
Did that influence any of the orders you chose to give or not give to the defendant?
No, it doesn't matter.
Why does it not? What is your basis of that statement, I guess?
Media, reporters, and standard citizens, they treat them all the same.
So you becoming aware that somebody is a member of the press does not affect your decision-making in reference to your First Amendment training?
No, and how was I to know that he was a member of the press? Whenever I interact with members of the press, they usually identify what station they're with or a group that they're with. They usually have some sort of identification, name badge, and we have good relationship with press out here. They don't approach us the way that DeCastro did.
Are you familiar with the difference between traditional press or independent media?
Yes, but again, independent media would approach us more respectfully than DeCastro.
Is your opinion that traditional media has different rights than new media, independent media?
Objection, Your Honor, at this point, I think we're well beyond the scope of.
Sustained.
Thank you.
And court's indulgence, I apologize. So your testimony is, if I recall correctly, that you received First Amendment training when you initially went through your officer training,
Yes.
and then you received one follow-up after that.
I can't, no, it was more than one. I don't know exactly how many. Typically that training is annual.
And your testimony, just to reiterate, this is the first time you've experienced a First Amendment issue of this nature in your career?
Objection, I believe I objected to that question when it was posed as like a violent encounter and it was sustained. And I also objected on the grounds of relevance. As the court indicated, what we're concerned about is his interaction with the defendant specifically. And so I object.
Sustained, I'm only concerned about this interaction.
Do you recall during your interactions with the defendant that you told him that you believed First Amendment auditors often pull out guns and shoot people?
I didn't say that they often do that.
Do you recall what you said?
I don't. I would have said that he was a stranger to me and that officers get ambushed all the time. It could have been a First Amendment auditor. It could have been a regular citizen. It could have been a cook from one of the places nearby. I wouldn't have specifically said that First Amendment auditors are at higher risk.
And again, just to reiterate, your testimony is that
Objection, I mean, anytime it's prefaced as just to reiterate, I feel like I should object on an asked and answered grounds. And I'm not, just to hear it, but it just sounds like a reiteration of the questions that have been previously asked. So my objection is asked and answered.
I'm going to ask this question before I rule on your objection.
again, I'm just trying to clarify because I think this point was ambiguous, but do you recall the defendant telling you that he was a member of the press during the interaction with the defendant?
Ask and answer.
Sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You redirect?
No, thank you.
Thank you, officer. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Officer, stand tight on the ante, please.
Does the state rest?
At this point, we do.
Does the defense have any witnesses?
Your Honor, I call Jose DeCastro.
No.
Remain standing, raise your right hand to be sworn by the clerk. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated.
Mr. DeCastro, before you testify, I'm obligated to inform you that you have the right to testify in this proceeding, but you also have the right to remain silent, and should you choose to remain silent, I may not hold that against you in making my decision. Do you understand that?
I do.
And do you still wish to testify?
Yes, I do.
All right, please go ahead.
You have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I do.
Can you give some insight into what that channel was about?
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance?
Your Honor, the relevance is that we're presenting a First Amendment defense, and the defendant is a member of the press. There's different standards for First Amendment rulings where there's public policy at issue. He can give insight into that.
I'm gonna allow it for a bit and see where it goes.
Yes, I do have I do have a YouTube channel, and the reason I have a YouTube channel is because of how many cops kill people every year, how many cops hurt, maim, torture, rape, and kill people every single year. It's such an epidemic that the rest of the world, I get thousands of emails saying, only in America does this happen. I started filming cops because when I was cheated in 2002 and
Objection at this point, relevance,
well, this is the reason I'm a member of the
this
press.
narrative,
So can you ask him a question?
Yes, Your Honor. What type of films do you make for your YouTube channel?
I only film police in their official capacity. I'm known across the country and across the world.
And why do you engage in that type of filming?
So I'm gonna ask you,
Relevance.
Mr. Mead, to direct your questions about the incident in question.
The reason I was filming Mr. Gort that day,
objection, Your Honor. Oh, sorry. There
So,
wasn't a question posed, so
Oh, I-
I'm not sure what he was.
Mr. DeCastro, on the dating question, why did you approach that vehicle?
I was filming that cop because that's what I do for a living. I am a member of the press. And I invoked my right to be press. I always invoke my right to be press within the first 10 seconds of engaging with police, and I have thousands of videos that prove this.
so this is how you make money.
This is not how specifically I make money. I make money from selling legal documents to people.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you recall the officer telling you to back up?
Yes, I do.
And what did you do after he told you to back up?
I took a couple steps back. I just showed him that I was willing to back up a little bit. However, if I may, in Arizona, they created a 10-foot law.
Objection, relevance, we're not in Arizona, it's the state of Nevada.
So I'm gonna allow it because I think that goes to why he kept saying 10 feet in the video, even though I will take judicial notice that you're not in the state of Arizona, you're in the state of Nevada.
Well, a federal judge struck it down, Your Honor, and what
Stop. Can you ask him a question?
Yes, Your Honor. Approximately how many feet did you back up?
I backed up a foot or two. I was at least 10 feet away from that car that the driver was pulled over in.
And when you spoke to the driver, what did you say?
Just after she was okay. The reason I film police is because they abuse people so often.
Do you recall the officer telling you not to speak with the driver?
Yes,
And did you make any statements to the driver after that command was given?
absolutely not.
Did the officer ever give you a specific distance to back up to?
No, he didn't.
If he did, would you have complied with that?
Sure,
Did you believe you were complying with the officer's commands?
100%. I also informed him I'm a member of the press, I'm a constitutional law scholar, that this is what I do.
Do you recall the officer explaining to you why he decided to arrest you?
There's several parts to the reason why he said he was going to arrest me. He said he was going to arrest me because I wouldn't turn my head a certain direction. If I didn't turn and face the car with my head, that he would place me under arrest instead of just giving me a ticket.
Do you recall him explaining why he decided to detain you before he arrested you?
He decided to obtain me because he said I was obstructing, which from my understanding is a physical act where I would have to get in the way. He said that the driver deserves privacy. I believe my First Amendment rights are not up for feelings.
Did he explain to you that the basis of your detention was related primarily to the issue of privacy or the issue of you backing up?
Well, I think from the officer's testimony, we can see that he's scared of the driver, scared of me, scared of everything. They teach them to be afraid of everything. So I had 2 cameras out. It's identified as a member of the press. I'm sorry, repeat the question. I want to get it specific for the record.
Sure. The question was, did the officer explain to you that the basis of your detention was because of you not backing up or because of the privacy issue of the driver?
It was both. He said that, he told me to back up. I backed up a little bit. Then he said, she deserves privacy. And then I told him to go get in your car, little doggy, and write your ticket. And at that point, his face turned bead red, and his veins in his neck stuck out because we were over 20 feet away. And you had to holler to hear each other because the wind was probably 30 miles an hour.
Did you at any point attempt to hit any of the officers involved?
No, absolutely not.
Did you intentionally swat any of the officers?
Absolutely not. He was giving me unlawful commands. I should not have been detained after identified as a member of the press. If he ever reached a hand out towards me, I wrestle and teach MMA and I have for 30 years. So it's just a natural reaction as I'm retreating from somebody. If I may have put my hand up, as he said, as he testified himself, I certainly am a law-abiding citizen. I don't break the law. So I would not have tried to assault an officer under any circumstances.
Is it possible that during the interactions there was inadvertent contact between you and the officer?
Sure, he decided to go hands-on with me when he was giving me unlawful commands. And there was absolutely no reason for it. I was willing to comply with anything he asked within reason, because I don't want to have a fist fight with another man on the street.
Do you recall the officer ordering you to go to his patrol vehicle?
I do.
And what did you do in response to that?
Initially, I told him no, but then when he began to get physical with me and start to grab me and touch me, I said, okay, I'll go over to your car. His car was 35 feet away. I then led him to his car. It's on video, you can see it. I walked right up to his car, and then he insisted still on grabbing me. After he saw me pull out an additional phone, which that's what press people do. We have lots of cameras on us.
And did you inform the officer that you were a member of the press?
Oh, several times. It's in the transcripts. I've transcribed them myself. Several times I told him I'm a member of the press.
And did you explain to the officer that you have a background in constitutional law?
Yes, I told him I'm a constitutional law scholar, which was a moniker given to me by other people who are also, they have their own channels, their own press, and that's what some other lawyers on another channel called me 3 years ago. And I since adapted the moniker.
And just to get some, I guess, further background, were you looking for police to report on this particular day?
No, the cops hide on the side of the road to pull people over. It's pretty regular in our country. I was just in the parking lot there. I saw that Mr. Bork had somebody pulled over, concerned for her safety. I began to film.
And why do you think that law enforcement traffic stops are relevant to the public?
That's where most people get killed.
Objection relevance to
Sustained.
that question. Move to strike.
Sustained.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
State.
I have no questions for this witness.
Thank you. Sir, you may step down. This is defense trust.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, any argument by the state?
Your Honor, the state asks you to find the defendant guilty of both the obstructing a public officer as well as resisting a public officer charged against him. The video very adequately portrays, and I don't think it's disputed by the defendant, what the context was of the interaction with the officer. I would venture to say that had the defendant just complied with the original order to not engage with the driver and to back up, we wouldn't be here. He wouldn't have found himself further engaging with Officer Bork. This is not a First Amendment issue. As you heard over and over and over again on the video, Officer Bork did not have a problem with the defendant recording. It's not a First Amendment issue, it's an officer safety issue. Here, you have an officer who conducted a lawful traffic stop. You saw the nature of the stop. There was no animosity between the officer and the driver. It was rather peaceful. They were engaged, banter back and forth. He would have, as he testified, he was trying to determine whether he was going to cite her or let her go with a warning. And then you have an individual, the defendant, introduce himself to a situation. Traffic stops, Your Honor, are inherently dangerous, particularly in crowded parking lots, I guess anywhere, I would venture to say. This officer was reasonable in thinking that anyone who would approach in the manner that the defendant approached his scene would have a reason to fear for his safety, or at least be suspicious of this individual's motives coming in. The officer had no problem with the recording. The officer had no problem with the defendant observing. It was when he inserted himself into this lawful detention that was occurring with the Hyundai driver that the officer turned his attention onto the defendant. This is not a First Amendment issue. This is an individual who took what he perceived to be his rights too far. The officer was well within his right, as well as acting reasonably when he asked him to back up. That 21-foot rule, it's appropriate. He said that was the training that they received in terms of the distance that's allowed for someone who means to do them harm. It's a threat assessment. We don't know when the defendant approached whether he had a gun concealed, whether he had a knife concealed, whether he had other weapons. And you'll hear multiple times in the video, Officer Bork yelling, "Stop reaching, stop reaching." This is an unknown, when defense counsel asked Officer Bork all of these questions about how it is that you do this, and Officer Bork kept responding, it depends on the situation, it depends on the totality of the circumstances. Here was an officer acting alone, individually, engaged one-to-one with a driver. That he had no problem with. You insert another individual who enters the scene in the manner that the defendant did, and now this officer's attention is going to be divided. He had every reason to fear for his safety as well as that of the driver. Again, if he had just complied with the officer's commands or demands to back up, and a lot was made about, hey, he didn't have an opportunity to tell the defendant exactly how far back. As the officer testified, even just with the, hey, back up, the defendant didn't back up, not willingly. That's why the officer had to continue to engage with him and force him into the situation. Had he complied, he would not have been charged with obstruction. Had he complied initially, he would not have been charged with the resisting. The officer was, you are going to have to assess credibility. There's nothing in the video or Officer Bork's testimony that would cause the court to question his veracity or his intention for that matter. He was very honest in that he didn't believe the defendant wasn't trying to harm him necessarily with the SWAT. That's why the defendant wasn't charged with the battery on a protected person or police officer. But that SWAT, Your Honor, I would argue, was meant to resist. At that point in time, the officer was trying to detain him and subsequently arrest him on the obstruction as depicted in the video. And so at this point, I think we've proved by beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did hinder Officer Bork's investigation and detention of the Hyundai driver, and that he resisted the officer's arrest and or attempt to arrest him. And so we would ask that you find the defendant guilty of both.
Right, thank you. Ben?
Yes, Your Honor. So first of all, you cannot obstruct an unlawful order. I disagree with the state that this is not a First Amendment issue. The First Amendment in this context actually has two parts. There's the filming and the right to film within a reasonable distance. The case law in all the federal circuits, Your Honor, there's no 21 feet rule that's been approved by any court of which I'm aware. That there is a 10-foot rule. That seems to be the rule that is applied by most of the federal circuits in interpreting the First Amendment. I submitted a bench brief that kind of goes through that issue, if the court's had a chance to review that.
I don't have that. When did you submit it?
It was submitted yesterday, Your Honor.
I mean, at this point, I would move to strike because it's untimely, but I mean, I got it this morning when I walked into court.
Go ahead.
So the officer's testimony that there's essentially this 21-foot distance where anybody can charge an officer and cause physical harm to an officer, if that is applied universally, Your Honor, it totally diminishes and violates the First Amendment. That is, as the officer testified, a 21-foot radius that he can attempt to impose. I believe his testimony was anytime there's not an obstacle between a person and somebody that law enforcement is interacting with. And that's just not what the law requires, Your Honor. The First Amendment gives their media, new media, old media, it gives individuals the right to film government agents. There's no dispute that that's the requirement, and if the officer is applying this 21-foot circumference to all law enforcement interactions, he's effectively eliminated the ability to film law enforcement going about their duties. The commands to not talk to the driver are also not based on any actual legal justification. There's no right to privacy in public, whether you're engaged with law enforcement or not. There's no requirement or no statute, no law that citizens can't interact with drivers that are interacting with law enforcement. So what's taken place here, Your Honor, is that this officer has taken it upon himself to essentially act as the legislature and created these rules that have no basis in any law and in fact are contrary to the First Amendment. Again, you can't obstruct an unlawful demand, so there is no obstruction of justice here. Resisting arrest, Your Honor, the court can see the video. Essentially what happened is he walked over to the front of the vehicle. There was some dispute about why he was being detained. That was discussed. The case law in that area, Your Honor, is that if it's an unlawful arrest, which it was in this case because they're essentially arresting him for violating these unlawful orders that they're pronouncing. Again, the case law is you can passively resist an unlawful arrest, and that's all that occurred here, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DeCastro, please stand. The problem with the argument that your attorney makes is it completely fails to consider the safety of the officer and the safety of the driver. The officer doesn't know who you are, and the driver doesn't know who you are. And you don't have any right to interfere with that officer doing his investigation and deciding if he wants to issue a ticket to this driver. And you also don't have any business approaching the driver. The driver didn't ask you for help. The driver didn't say, help, help, you know. You didn't see an altercation happening between the officer and this driver. The officer didn't protest that you were filming. There's no problem with filming. You can film, it's fine, all right? But you did interfere with his investigation. You did interfere with his ability to do his job. You did put him in a position where he is concerned for his safety and the safety of the driver. So I believe the state's met their burden beyond reasonable doubt. I'm going to find you guilty of obstructing a public officer and resisting a public officer. So I'd like to hear from the state and then your attorney prior to sentencing.
Your Honor, in terms of sentencing, I would ask that our defendant enter and complete a an impulse control class. I would ask that the court lobby a $500 fine or the equivalent in community service. I would ask that the defendant be ordered to stay out of trouble for the pendency of the case. And I would ask for a 90-day suspended sentence. And that's on as to each count to one concurrent. That's our request.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I'm asking the court to sentence the defendant to credit for time served for these offenses. Even if the court concludes, and the court did conclude that he didn't have the right to do what he did, I think the court can see that he sincerely believed that he had the right to do so. That's based on his past experiences and the training he's received in reference to the First Amendment. I don't think there was any intent from the defendant to engage in any wrongdoing in this case, Your Honor. And that being the case, especially because of the public policy interests at issue.
So when you say he doesn't wish to engage in any wrongdoing, it seems to me from observing him in the video that he wants this. He wants to get arrested. He wants to get into an altercation with police officers. He welcomes this. This helps his YouTube channel. He called the officers here in my courtroom today pigs. He called and he's nodding his head up and down. So apparently he hates every law enforcement officer in the United States. All right, please stand up, sir. Are you finished with your request for credit for time served?
I would just emphasize, Your Honor, that the defendant testified and he sincerely believes that he is providing a public service when he reviews and films these incidents. I understand the court may have a different view of that, but when we're talking about First Amendment public policy issues such as supervising people involved in government, I think that is something the court can take into consideration, not to have a chilling effect on that. I'll spit on that, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. DeCastro, please stand. I hereby sentence you to 90 days in the Clark County Detention Center on count 1, 90 days in the Clark County Detention Center on count 2, to run consecutive for a total of 180 days in custody. Thank you.
Sentence suspended or?
Oh, no, I'm going to start right now.
Can you put two, please? I'm going to keep shoulders check. This is a travesty of justice. Unbelievable. I don't like police. They'll put me in jail for half a year. How long have I been in